The world is a place filled with chaos and malevolence. This is not an exaggeration or a dark fantasy. It is the reality you must face if you are to live a meaningful life. There is darkness in the hearts of men, in the systems they create, and even within yourself. Ignoring this fact does not make it disappear. It only ensures that it will catch you unprepared. The first step toward confronting this darkness is to acknowledge it honestly. To live in denial is to live as a child, sheltered and vulnerable. But to live with eyes wide open, to recognize the existence of cruelty, chaos, and evil, is to take the first step toward real strength. Strength is not arrogance or domination. True strength is moral courage. It is the capacity to stand against the tides of chaos, to hold your ground when everything around you threatens to fall apart. It means facing the harsh realities of the world without losing your humanity. This strength is not given to you. It is earned by choosing order over chaos, truth over deception, and responsibility over passivity every single day. It is the cumulative effect of small, consistent acts of courage. You have within you the capacity to create order, both in your own life and in the world around you. Order is not perfection. It is a stabilizing structure that allows for growth, for flourishing, for meaning. Without order, chaos encroaches, and with chaos comes suffering and destruction. But order is fragile. It requires vigilance and effort. You must continually renew your commitment to the values that sustain it: honesty, discipline, empathy, and courage. Confronting malevolence is not about fighting fire with fire. It is not about descending into bitterness, hatred, or revenge. Those paths lead only to further destruction, both externally and within your own soul. Instead, confronting darkness means shining a light into it. It means bringing clarity and understanding where there is confusion and ignorance. It means acting with integrity even when it is costly. And it means refusing to be a victim, refusing to allow the malevolence of others to define your identity or dictate your actions. This battle is both external and internal. The world is dangerous, but so are the destructive impulses within yourself: resentment, envy, laziness, cruelty. You must be vigilant against these inner shadows, because if you allow them free rein, they will undermine your capacity to resist external chaos. The first battle is within. Mastery of yourself is the foundation upon which you build the courage to face the external world. You do this by cultivating discipline, honesty, and self-awareness. When you stand upright in the face of darkness, you become a beacon for others. You embody the possibility that order can be restored, that good can prevail, that suffering can be met with strength and dignity. Others will look to you not because you are perfect, but because you refuse to give in. This is the heroic path, the path of the person who carries their burden and helps others carry theirs. It is not a glamorous path. It is often lonely and filled with hardship, but it is the path worth taking. Because the alternative is to let chaos reign, to let despair and destruction become the norm. By choosing to stand against malevolence with courage and order, you carve out a space in the world where life can thrive. You make yourself a participant in the ongoing struggle between order and chaos, good and evil. This is not a one-time act. It is a lifelong commitment. Every day, in the small decisions you make, you choose either to uphold order or to surrender to chaos. The temptation to fall into resentment or passivity will be strong, but the stronger temptation, the more dangerous one, is to believe that your actions don't matter, that you are powerless in the face of overwhelming darkness. That is a lie. Your actions matter. They ripple outward, affecting the world in ways you may never fully see. So you must act as if what you do matters, because it does. By cultivating courage and order within yourself, you become an agent of light in a dark world. And that light, no matter how small, pushes back the shadows. You are not yet who you could be, and that's not an insult, it's an invitation. There is something dormant in you, something with potential. But for it to come to life, something else has to die. You cannot stay exactly as you are and expect to grow. That's a contradiction, Growth, by definition, demands transformation, and transformation requires sacrifice. You have to let go of the things that keep you weak, even if you've grown comfortable with them. You have to give up the excuses, the habits, the false identities, the stories you tell yourself to justify inaction. You sacrifice who you are now for who you could be, because the alternative is stagnation, and stagnation is suffering in slow motion. There's a reason the idea of sacrifice is present in every major tradition and myth system. It's not just about giving something up. It's about giving up something of value now for something of greater value later. That's delayed gratification, but it's deeper than that. It's spiritual, it's moral. You're trading the part of you that resists responsibility, that hides from challenge, for the part of you that seeks meaning and bears weight. And that's not an easy trade, because the old self is familiar. You know how to be that version of you. But that version has brought you as far as it can. Now it's time to aim higher. You might be afraid of who you could become. And that fear is real, because stepping into your potential means stepping away from safety. It means walking into the unknown. It means confronting the discomfort of failure, of ridicule, of being misunderstood, but remaining in the same place, repeating the same patterns, staying in the same toxic relationships, engaging in the same shallow distractions, that's not safe either. That's slow self-destruction disguised as comfort, and deep down you know it. To grow, you must choose the harder path, not because suffering is good for its own sake, but because enduring the right kind of suffering is what builds strength. You sacrifice laziness to gain discipline. You sacrifice impulsivity to gain stability. You sacrifice meaningless pleasure to gain purpose. You sacrifice your pride to gain wisdom. Each of these exchanges is painful, but necessary, because anything meaningful costs something. And if you're not willing to pay the price, you'll never know what might have been possible. There's a danger in always choosing what is easiest. The easy path leads downhill. It asks nothing of you, and in return, it gives you nothing of value. But the path of sacrifice, the path that requires effort and commitment, that's the path that leads upward. And climbing is hard. It hurts. It requires that you leave behind the weight you don't need, even if that weight is a part of your identity. Maybe it's your anger, maybe it's your victimhood, maybe it's your refusal to forgive, but if it's holding you down, it has to go. That doesn't mean you abandon everything. It means you make a careful assessment: what is worth keeping, what is essential to who you want to become, and what must be burned away so that something new can grow in its place. These are not superficial questions. They cut to the heart of your life, and they require honesty and courage and a willingness to endure discomfort in the service of something higher. The person you could become is watching you, waiting, calling you forward, but that future self will never emerge if you're not willing to change. So, you make the sacrifice, you take the leap, you walk away from who you were, not because that person was evil or worthless, but because there's more in you. And the world needs what you could be, not what you've settled for. You must tell the truth, not because it's convenient, not because it guarantees you'll be rewarded, but because without truth, everything you build is brittle, hollow, and false. Lies, even small ones, have a way of multiplying. One untruth leads to another, and before long, you don't even remember who you were before you began twisting reality to suit your temporary needs. The consequences of that aren't always immediate, but they're inevitable. You become cynical. You lose trust in others because you know you're not trustworthy yourself. And slowly, the world becomes a place where no one can be believed, not even you. Speaking the truth forces you to confront the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. And that's hard, because the world is often harsh, unfair, and chaotic. But if you refuse to see clearly, if you refuse to speak honestly, you give up your only real defense against suffering. You walk blind into danger, and then pretend to be surprised when you're hurt. Truth grounds you. It aligns you with reality. And reality, despite its brutality, is ultimately where meaning resides. But truth isn't just about facts or accuracy. It's about orientation. It's about choosing to aim your life at what's good, what's honest, what's meaningful rather than what's easy, what's manipulative or what's expedient. When you aim upward, you set your sights on something beyond your immediate gratification. You decide that your actions, your words, and your thoughts will be guided by a standard that transcends your current mood or situation. That's not just a strategy for success, it's a necessity for survival, because without a target, without direction, your life becomes chaotic. And chaos left unchecked will devour you. You've seen what happens to people who refuse to aim. They drift. They become bitter. They look for someone to blame, and eventually they turn their anger outward, onto the world, or inward, onto themselves. That's a terrible fate, and it's avoidable, but only if you decide to pick a direction, no matter how humble or uncertain it might be at first. You don't need to know exactly where you're going. You just need to know that you're not going to stay where you are. And then you aim, you write down your goals, you commit to something, you take a risk, and maybe you fail. That's fine. Failure is data. It tells you what didn't work. What matters is that you're moving forward, that you're not stagnating, that you're willing to adjust and re-aim as you go. Life is a process of constant refinement. You aim, you miss, you learn, you aim again. That's how skill develops. That's how character is formed, and that's how you build a life worth living. But it all begins with the truth. With looking in the mirror and saying, "Here's where I am, and it's not good enough. I can be better." That's the foundation of real growth. Not self-loathing, but honest self-assessment. You see the gap between who you are and who you could be, and instead of running from it, you use it as motivation. That gap is where ambition comes from. And ambition, rightly oriented, is not selfish, it's redemptive. Because when you grow, you don't just improve your own life, you lift others up with you. You become someone who can be relied on. Someone who others turn to. Someone who speaks with authority not because they demand it, but because they've earned it. Telling the truth and aiming at the good doesn't mean you'll be perfect. You'll still fall short, you'll still struggle. But each time you choose truth over deception, and direction over aimlessness, you strengthen something inside yourself. You build the kind of integrity that can't be bought or faked. And over time, that becomes a light not just for you, but for others who are lost in the dark. Life is not fair, and it never will be. That's not a cynical observation, it's an honest one. Illness strikes the healthy. Death comes for the innocent. People betray one another. Opportunities are missed. Accidents happen. And no matter how careful or virtuous you are, you will suffer. Everyone does. It's woven into the structure of existence itself. And so, the question is not whether suffering will come, but what you will do when it does. You can't avoid it, but you can decide how to respond to it. You can either face it voluntarily, or be crushed by it resentfully. When you face suffering voluntarily, you act out one of the oldest and most powerful truths known to humanity, that by confronting what is difficult, painful, and unjust head-on, you transform your relationship with it. You no longer see yourself as merely a victim of circumstances. You become someone who has chosen to carry the burden, and that simple act of will changes everything. It doesn't eliminate the suffering, but it gives it structure, it gives it direction, it transforms pain into meaning, and meaning is what allows you to keep going, even when you have every reason to quit. Many people believe that the goal of life is to be happy, but happiness is a byproduct, not a goal. It comes and goes, it's tied to circumstances, and those can change in an instant. If your entire life is oriented toward the pursuit of happiness, then any moment of pain or failure will feel like a catastrophe. But if your life is oriented toward meaning, toward shouldering your share of the suffering with integrity, then even the darkest moments can become bearable. You start to realize that the worst things in life are not necessarily the suffering itself, but the bitterness and resentment that come when suffering is faced with cowardice or denial. When you adopt a posture of voluntary confrontation with suffering, you become something stronger than your circumstances. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What can I do in the face of this?" That shift in mindset, though simple, is profound. It turns chaos into order. It turns despair into responsibility. It gives you the tools to build something, even when everything seems to be falling apart. That doesn't mean you won't feel grief or fear or pain. You will, but you won't be defined by them. You'll be the one who bears them and keeps walking. Think about the figures we admire most, real or fictional. They are not people who had easy lives. They're the ones who walked through fire and came out on the other side with their souls intact. They are those who chose to act nobly in the face of tragedy. And that choice is available to you too. Not just in grand, heroic moments, but in the everyday grind, in the decision to get out of bed when you're tired, to do your work even when no one notices, to tell the truth when it would be easier to lie. These are the small sacrifices that prepare you for the larger burdens. Voluntarily accepting suffering also connects you with the suffering of others. You become less self-absorbed, less entitled. You start to see that everyone is carrying something and that empathy is not just a feeling, it's a responsibility. When you understand your own suffering, you become more compassionate, more helpful, more grounded. And you begin to recognize that by carrying your own load well, you make it easier for others to carry theirs. This is not a one-time decision, it's a daily practice. Every morning you wake up and decide again, will I turn away from the pain, or will I meet it willingly? Will I let it deform me, or will I let it shape me into something resilient, disciplined, and meaningful?